Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing to be part of this project, helping our parents. And we're all parents, so and we've got that perspective, and we're all therapists, so we got that perspective. So let's share some of what we can with folks in the hope that we can help some people to work with their own parenting in ways that are better for them and better for their kids. And that would be good. So, Duran, you had something to comment on?
I just wanted to share a sentiment when you talked about parenting as a divorced dad, and how I feel society stereotypes based on gender and based on culture how you should parent. Like mothers should parent this way, fathers should parent this way. And I find the traditional model of fathers parenting to be very kind of detached and, only through resources or providing money and shelter, and not necessarily from an emotional standpoint that fathers are important for the care of their children, for the nurturing of their children, just as much as mothers. So when you said that, that really resonated for me, because I have an absent father who was in prison most of my life, and I feel that void, and so I really resonated with the whole deadbeat dad, and just the fact that you were aware that my child needs a father. Like a lot of fathers don't feel emotionally that their children need them.
Yeah, and I think with divorce, even like for me, I was completely engaged father from the beginning. Like I was the one that put them to bed. I'm the one that if they get an owie, I'm the one that sues. But then the minute a divorce happens, the stigmas just start plowing in, and you start thinking, well, first, am I only going to get to see them every other week? I'm the one that puts them to bed every night, So, but then, luckily nowadays, a lot of times fathers who are engaged will get 50-50. But then you're in the grocery store with your kids, and you could just see people like, you don't have a wedding ring on, you got these kids, and what I noticed is that it can in divorce, at least in myself as a divorced father, parts might protect and come up and get maybe more agitated when kids are acting silly at the grocery store. Like, so you're in line and they're grabbing stuff, and I noticed, for me, I would get a little bit angry and be like, what are you guys doing? Stop acting like that, And then when using IFS, I looked inside and I found a part that was like terrified that people would be watching and think, oh, he's a divorced dad, he can't control those kids. Like he's not a good parent. And then I had to tell that part, wait a minute, you teach child development, you train, you help parents know how to parent, you're going to be okay. And that part was able to kind of be more patient and not feel the need to just jump forward and get mad at the kids.
I think one of the biggest hang-ups parents tend to have, or struggles, I don't know if hang-up is the right word, but is feeling judged. Whether you're a divorced parent or whether you're a mom that's just in the grocery store with your kids. And whenever I teach parenting classes, one of the first things I talk about is, paying attention to where your reaction is coming from, kind of like you were naming, and if it's a part of you that's feeling embarrassed because you feel like people are watching, and what might it be like if you were able to give yourself permission to let that go, to not worry about what other people are thinking, or if they're judging you or not, and how that might change how you're interacting with your child. That's a huge, a huge block, I think, or struggle for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
My experience of some of the gendered pieces is a little different from yours, but I remember my co-parent, my kid's mom, would get so angry because I'm a very involved dad, right? And I'll take Maya out in the sling, and we'd go for a walk with the dogs and the pushchair, right? And in the village that I live in, a lot of the women would be like, oh, he's so good with her, look. And she'd say to me, you're taking our child out. I take our child out every day. I don't get, she's so good with her. What I get is, where's that baby's hat? It's cold. Right? And so the criticisms to her from other moms, and the same moms that would like look at me in this really positive way because I would be willing to be seen with my own baby, which is bizarre to me. But I became conscious of it when she was talking to me about it. And there was one time, I also became aware of a disparity based on gender. There's one time I was going to the coffee shop, I had the baby in the sling, I had the stroller, I had 2 dogs that I had to tie up. You know, it's complicated sometimes with a baby, right? So I'm doing all that, and then I go into the coffee shop, and some guys walked ahead of me, and he did not hold the door open. And so I got an angry party came up, and I'm like, hey, got the baby here. And he's like, oh, sorry, man. He's like, right. And I went, and I thought, I've never seen a woman do that. I've seen a woman struggle with shopping and the stroller, and the door closes on her, and she tries to open it, but I've never seen that response from a woman. Like, hey, you know, that sense, it's a sense of entitlement that I had as a man with my baby, and I just notice it. I'm just aware of it as a gender difference.
Interesting.
I think for me too, when you talked about like being in the store, there's a lot of shame from being different. Like if I'm doing things different from my culture or different from what I think is expected, then I start to feel a little more anxiety, a little more pressure. Particularly like if I'm in a lot of Black environments, we're kind of known for being harsh and strict, and I'm not that. Like I always say I like being the fun mom. I don't want to be angry mom. Like angry mom is not fun for me, and I don't think it's fun for my son.
Yeah.
So I really try to be open and like allow him to be expressive and to ask questions, and we talk constantly. And in certain environments, that's kind of seen as different. Like why is she doing that? What might be seen as disrespectful? Like why can he just ask any question that's on his mind, or And so sometimes I will find myself treating him differently, like you said, based on what environment we're in, and I had to like really become more aware of that. Like, am I treating him differently because I really feel like what he's doing is inappropriate, or am I trying to please the crowd?
Right.
Yeah,
and there was a huge mentality, that existed probably in the 50s, right? Of parents or children are to be seen and not heard, and there are people that still hold on to that belief system, and so it's easy to start feeling self-conscious about it.
I was also reading a book, and they were saying, like, specifically with Black children, we don't want them to be seen. Because back in the day, to be seen meant you might be sold.
Right.
You might cause problems, you could be killed, you could be, you could get us whipped. Like, you were not to be seen or heard, because to be seen or heard was a threat. It was survival.
So be invisible.
So that's still passed down, kind of. We don't unconsciously aren't aware that other children are allowed to be more free and expressive, and we're kind of unconsciously like restricting our children so that they're not.
It almost sounds like a cultural legacy burden.
It is.
That's what I was just thinking.
For sure.
Well, visibility in and of itself, even just being in a community and, oh, you know who I am, or you know who my family is, and now I'm in the grocery store and my child is misbehaving, and I have an immediate audience.
Right.
And so that internal critic that shows up, and that sense of there's a right way I'm supposed to respond to this, or this is not supposed to be happening.
Right.
And
and I have a child with special needs, and when he was younger, you couldn't really tell that there was anything different about him. And sometimes he would act out, or throw himself on the floor, or have a tantrum, or not kind of come along with me. And people's responses are interesting. One time we were in an airport, and we had been flying all night, and he was only probably 4 years old, and he was exhausted because our plane had been delayed. And he kept like stopping and throwing a fit, and people were coming up to him and saying things like, "Stop doing that to your mother," and like, interjecting themselves. And it was just amazing to me, that people, A, would do that, but B, the response that I had was total shame, and I just wanted to tell everybody he has special needs. Like, this is not a typical kid, and he's been flying for 24 hours. So, when we have a different situation, it really makes things a little tougher.
I think because of that, like, I've increased in compassion for other moms.
Yes.
And what I've learned to offer is like, do you need help?
Right.
That's been a big thing for me. If I see a mom or dad who seems like, they might be having a challenge, I don't want to assume anything. I just ask, and offer.
I think that sisterhood of parenthood is kind of the mantra that I've had. It's like we need to create a sisterhood because moms can be so. I just remember when my daughter was in preschool and the other moms just being really judgmental and petty about, whereas you should be supporting and saying, what do you need? How can I help you? And gosh, I have this struggle.
Right.
Do you have this struggle too? And being honest with each other and being able to have honest conversations is how we all learn and become better parents.
So-
There needs to be more of that.
So what gets in the way, do you think? Because I mean, that sounds great, and that sounds like it should be easy,
Yeah.
right? What gets in the way?
I think it's that, I should know what I'm doing. I should have it all together. And especially as a therapist, right? Like, we really should know what we're doing. And so to admit that we don't or that we're struggling is pretty vulnerable. Yeah, that fear of judgment. The fear of judgment is huge.
Well, it acknowledges all the parts of all of the people who give themselves permission to attempt to co-parent when it wasn't solicited.
Yeah.
Somebody approaching me in a public place to tell me, oh, try this or do this, without asking, would you like a hand?
Yeah.
Immediately implies you're doing it wrong. So it triggers those
Yeah.
really young wounded parts.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed after experiencing IFS is how we can hold space for people and how we can almost share our self-energy with people. So what I've noticed is, when you're at a grocery store or you're somewhere and a child is acting up or throwing a fit or whatever it may be, or the parent is struggling, they are going to glance at you at some point and see, and even if you're quiet, but if you're stiff, but if you're able to soften yourself and not even be looking at them, but just to offer like, I'm okay with this, like I'm here with you and I get it, like I'm a parent too. I noticed that even the child seems to settle because the energy around that situation tends to just because if mom looks over, dad looks over and they see somebody getting tense, then they're going to feel embarrassed and get more tense. And then, and this is something that I also notice is that people say it works. Like, well, at that point, I'm going to lean into my kid and I'm going to whisper in their ear, you better stop it, or blah, blah, blah. And they might stop and they say, see, that works. But that's one of the most dangerous things with parenting is it works because it might work in the moment, but the impact is not something you want to be giving your child. So as observers, we could help them not go to that place by just kind of holding space for them. And maybe if you feel open to ask, I think that's great. But I also think just even if you're just like a soft observer and just, I'm good with this, you're okay, I'm no judgment.
It makes me think about when my daughter was a toddler and we flew with her and she like screamed the whole time on the flight. And now when I get on a flight and there's a fussy child, I have so much compassion because as a parent, you're totally stressed out, which is of course probably feeding their anxiety and they continue to cry. And I oftentimes, now that I'm a parent, my attitude is a lot different than before, that I'll oftentimes find myself, saying to people it's so hard, when, and really extending compassion. And you can just see because there's a fear of just being judged and made to feel like you're being a bad parent.